Okay guys, in this episode I'm going to do another shootout between the Quad Cortex and the Kemper and see how they compare when profiling or capturing a very tricky amplifier. And one of the trickiest amplifiers that I have here is the JP-2C Plus. Now, several months ago, I tried to profile the JP with my Kemper and I was going to release a pack with it, but I spent a lot of time down here just pulling my hair out basically because I couldn't get it to sound the way I wanted it to. But I've also recently profiled it with the Quad Cortex and came out with excellent results. So I want to revisit this whole thing and do a shootout between the Kemper and the Quad Cortex and just see how far off or how close they are to profiling the same amplifier. Now, just so you know, the profiles that I did with the Kemper several months ago weren't terrible, but they just weren't up to a standard that I wanted to be proud of. You know, if I was going to release this pack and put it up on my website and charge people for it, they just weren't there. But in the future, if I do release profiles of the JP on the Kemper, trust me, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make them sound as good as I can get them. And I will be working on that very soon. Now, I'm going to profile this amplifier with the exact same settings on both units, the same mic positions and everything. There's not going to be anything changed about the amplifier, the mics, or the placement of the mics when I do these profiles. I have nothing to gain by doing this. I'm just doing this as an informational thing for, well, myself and for you guys. So I'm going to compare the Kemper profile to the actual amp, and then I'm going to compare the capture on the QC to the amp as well. And then at the end of it, I'm going to compare the QC capture up against the Kemper profile. So let's get started with the Kemper profile right now. And yes, I'm going to refine it, so don't worry about that. All right, so here we go. Okay, so the profiling process is done with the Kemper. Now to refine the profile. Okay, so now let's compare the real amp to the Kemper profile. I'm going to start with the real amp and play the same riff through both the amp and the profile. All right, so those are raw amp tones, no overdrives, nothing else involved, just raw amp tones and no processing, no nothing. So here's what I'm noticing here. Number one, the definition that I got on this profile naturally was 7.0. Okay, I want to get like 8 to 10. Now, I thought that was pretty good, considering, you know, it's my first profile of the night, but I'm shooting for a natural, like organic definition setting of, I want 10, you know, because the higher the definition setting is naturally, the better the top end is on the profile. That's just the way it works. Now, you can turn the definition up and, you know, and tweak it a little bit, but you don't want to go too far because then it starts sounding really thin, anemic, and it just doesn't sound natural anymore. So this is probably high enough where I could probably turn it up to like 9, you know, and get a little better top end out of it, but I don't want to cheat and do that. So what I want to do is just leave it as it is. And then now I'm going to switch to the Quad Cortex and do the same exact thing and compare that profile or that capture to the actual amp as well. And then later in the video, I'll line them all up against each other and show you guys how they sound. And then you can make your own decision on which one sounds best to you. So now let's switch over to the Quad Cortex and do the exact same thing. All right, so I'm all set up with the Quad Cortex, so let's go ahead and start the capturing process with that. Okay, so we're done with the capture process with the Quad Cortex. So now let's compare the real amp to the capture in the Quad Cortex, starting with the amplifier. now let's hear how the capture on the Quad Cortex compares directly to the profile on the Kemper. I'm going to do this with and without their own internal overdrives. Starting without the overdrive now. I'm in editing mode right now, and I've already listened to everything after I put everything up against each other side by side, and here are my findings. I think both units did a very good job at capturing the JP. I was actually pretty surprised at how close both of them were. Especially when you listen to everything side by side, that's when the results are, you know, undeniable. I mean, it's just right there in front of you. And honestly, this is the best I think the Kemper has ever done profiling the JP, at least in my experience. So in my opinion, here are the biggest differences between both units regarding the profiles of the JP. The Quad Cortex capture was a little bit tighter than the Kemper profile. Now that's with or without the overdrive pedal. Both ways it was just a bit tighter. Now I think that there's reasons for that. Now number one, with the Quad Cortex, there's not a definition setting, so I don't know what the definition is on the Quad Cortex because it doesn't have that setting, but I would assume that it would be higher if it had one. And the reason why I say that is because the Quad Cortex had a little bit more of a hi-fi on the top end than the Kemper did. The Kemper was a little softer on the top end, and the low end was a little bit looser, I guess, for lack of a better word. But all that said, and I can't stress this enough, both units, again, did a really good job. So what I'm going to do here is take advantage of some of the options that Kemper gives us to fine-tune the profiles after we make them. Now, even though I think the Kemper did a great job capturing the overall, you know, spirit of the amplifier, I think we can fine-tune it a little bit and really make it sound a lot better. So let me go ahead and do that now, and I'll tell you exactly what I did to make that happen after I'm done. I'm going to listen to it through the studio monitors and take out my in-ears now and make that happen. Well, that was quick. I mean, all I had to do was turn the definition up from 7 to 9, and then I turned the gain down from 6 to 5. So I just slightly lowered the gain, and it tightened up quite a bit. And the overdrive pedal is not engaged at this point. So now I'm going to really fine-tune it with the overdrive pedal because I boost everything. So I'm going to go ahead and engage the overdrive pedal now and fine-tune it some more. And let's see how it sounds after I'm done with all of this. Well, there you have it. All I did was just do a few tweaks to the overdrive pedal, and I think it sounds great. I would totally feel confident uploading something like this to my website and putting it in a pack and selling it. I mean, this sounds fantastic. Now, the Kemper has been around for about 12 years now, but that said, it still has a really good standing in shootouts like this one here. I mean, I think it had a really good showing against a newer product that has newer, different algorithms and a more, possibly more updated type software that it's using to do the captures or profiles. But I am glad that Kemper still gives us the options to be able to tweak things afterwards. And yes, you can tweak things in the Quad Cortex as well. I mean, but most of that is amp based. Like you can, adjust the gain, the treble, mids, and bass and stuff like that. But the Kemper allows you to go a little bit deeper to do those tweaks. But on the other hand, with the Quad Cortex, at least in this particular shootout, I didn't need to do anything under the hood with the amplifier to tweak it to make it sound better. It just captured it perfectly, in my opinion. And another thing I want to mention is with the Quad Cortex, I can actually utilize a noise gate when I'm doing my captures. And that doesn't seem to be the case with the Kemper, at least with the way I have things hooked up here. All things equal, I can use the noise gate with the Quad Cortex, but not with the Kemper. And that's a really important thing. And I'm going to let you listen to a sound clip that I recorded while I was doing the profiling on the Kemper. Did you hear the amp noise in the background while the Kemper was sending the signals through the amplifier so it could record all of the frequencies coming from the amplifier? You could hear that noise in the background, and those mics are picking up not only the signals that the Kemper is sending through the amp, but the noise in the background as well. And I think that without that noise, I'm going to get cleaner, more defined, and more accurate profiles with the Kemper. So maybe if Kemper updates its algorithm or software or whatever that they use to do profiles with, maybe they'll allow us to use a noise gate now like the Quad Cortex does. And again, there might be some trick that you could do to use a noise gate with the Kemper, but I had everything set up equally down here. And again, the Kemper did not like the noise gate, but the Quad Cortex didn't mind having it in the chain at all. And with the Quad Cortex, I had zero background noise while I was doing the captures. I mean, there was no background noise from the amplifier at all. The amp was just dead quiet unless it was having signals being put through it, but there was no noise at all in the background. And you got to keep in mind, again, like I said before, the mics pick up everything that are coming out of those speakers, including amp noise. So I think that's an important thing to take note of in this shootout. Well, anyways, not to be overly redundant, but I think both units did a great job in this particular shootout, and I'm really grateful for all of the stuff that Kemper lets us do under the hood to get our profiles to sound as good as they can. I mean, that definition feature really does help big time. You just don't want to push it too much. I mean, seriously, you go too far with it and your profiles get really anemic sounding, and you don't want that at all. Just go a little bit, enough to just tighten it up and give it that nice top end that you're looking for, and leave it at that. Now, if we were doing an amplifier like the Stealth, I probably wouldn't need to do anything under the hood with the Kemper, because that amplifier profiles like a champ. I mean, it's just a very easy amplifier to capture, the essence of, as opposed to like amps like the JP and even the Rev Mark III. I'm still fighting with that one with the Kemper as well. But I'm going to figure it out, trust me. But on the more trickier amps, I think the Quad Cortex does a more accurate job with less hassle, less tweaking underneath the hood. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you guys got something out of this episode. I sure learned a lot, and I was happy to share what I learned with you guys. And if you want to check out some of my Kemper profiles or my QC captures, go ahead and click on the link provided below in the description of the video and go to my website and try some out for yourself. I'll be doing a lot more profiles on the Kemper and captures on the Quad Cortex and filling up my website with those very soon. Well, I got a lot more stuff coming up for you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.